let's get to the news of the day. Well, not the news of the day, but Brad Holmes did speak this week, and his whole thing was about maximizing strategy, which he said, I feel like we did the best that we could and with the mix maximize the resources we had available to those are good positions to have. He was basically talking about, the financial the ability to sign his own players like Jack Campbell and Jahmyr Gibbs, who they're still deciding if they're going to use a fifth year option. Now, I have heard some interesting kind of like tidbits to it. So, like you obviously you think about the fifth year option for Jack Campbell. Well, there's people that think he could be lumped in with an edge rusher, so his option would go up higher. And obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs, do you want to get him locked down now, or do you want to get him locked down later? And I think if you're trying to play the game of is the cost going to go up? I mean, look at some of the players that are going to. When does Bijan get a deal? Like, does the Atlanta Falcons try to beat you to the punch? Because that's kind of like your comparison right now. So I don't know where you stand on the whole the option thing, but when I heard that Jack Campbell could get lumped in with edge rushers, I said, "Holy shit, you might have to pay Jack Campbell for his option."
Yeah, I mean, it really seems like just from sitting back and reading the tea leaves and the reports and everything like that, it certainly seems inevitable that the Lions are going to extend those two players this offseason. Now, if you're going off some of the similar timelines, it would be pretty much right around now. I mean, I remember speaking of the Detroit draft you were referencing, it was days before that draft where a bunch of the original extensions happened with Sewell and St. Brown and
Goff, yeah.
yeah, and so if it is going to happen, it very well could be right around now. And yeah, I did see that. That is interesting with Jack Campbell, and that that just seems like kind of a weird thing in general that it can even you're even trying to analyze it from that way because he's really not an edge rusher at all. But yeah, it could just be a weird technicality thing. I've seen a lot of people have a ton of different opinions on Jack Campbell specifically, just because he just seems like he's for sure just a true Lion, and he doesn't seem like someone really that would on surface care that much to haggle or whatever. He just wants to get a deal done and play football. But in the same
Yep.
time, if there is that thing with it kicks in automatically and it is way more money than it would be otherwise. But yeah, I almost don't even think too much about those two guys at this point, just because in my mind it's so inevitable that they're probably going to be both extended pretty shortly.
Yeah, I think they're going to be extended shortly, and I was perplexed when I heard that Jack Campbell qualifies as an edge rusher because they lump in the linebackers with the edge rushers, and I was like, that would totally happen. Like that would totally happen in the NFL. Like you would think that a linebacker like Jack Campbell would be on his own accord because he's not an edge rusher, but because of the way that it's structured, he will be lumped in with edge rushers. That's basically the way it was reinforced, and that's why the discussion about his option is on the table. Because do you want to wait for his option to be an exorbitant amount, or do you want to sign him to a deal? And that's kind of what the dilemma right now is. And Brad Holmes is going to try to work on it because obviously we heard Brad Holmes talk, and he said this year that he skipped the owners' meetings, 100% focus on the draft board. 9 selections heading into Pittsburgh for the NFL draft. Fifth-year options, like we said, not picked up as of now. With Jack Campbell and Jahmyr Gibbs, trade calls typically start now, but no significant movement yet. Last week we talked about it on this very podcast, and we talked about trading up, and we hear people mentioning that the Cowboys might trade up to the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns pick at 6 looks like it could be potentially be had, but obviously the Cowboys have another first round pick. So it's going to be very interesting at this draft. I think this is one of the most wild drafts because if I've heard multiple different people say that this draft is where you throw out the positional value chart that a lot of people love to use as their crutch. Remember when the Lions drafted Gibbs and Campbell, people were like, positional value. That's terrible. It's like, nah, they were kind of were the best players in the draft at that position, and that's what you're trying to do. And that was another thing that Brad Holmes talked about was best player available versus need. And he says needs change annually. Elite talent is permanent. What you may not seem like an immediate need right now might not be the case next year. And I agree with this philosophy to a T. Um, I don't know about you, James, but this to me this seems like this is not something that I want to like sit here and cry about. Oh, you could have a player offensive tackle like we talked about last week who is the fifth best offensive tackle, or you could have the second best edge rusher. Who are you choosing? Like who are you choosing? You're probably going to choose the second best edge rusher, not the fifth best tackle. Oh,
Should be good there. It said my internet cut out for a second, but no, I was uh, going off of your point there. I think I pretty much heard everything you said, but yeah, I mean, this can be a true test of the best player available, just because in theory you're not in a position where there's exactly what's going to be there. There could be a number of different positions that are graded out somewhat similarly. Um, at the same time, and I've heard people talk about this, I do think maybe sometimes we go a little, maybe a little too literal with it, because I still think if there was like a quarterback or a running back that they had graded super high, they still probably wouldn't take it. But
yeah.
but they are with this certain pick or the specific pick at 17. I do think you basically just rank it off who is your best prospect, because you could have two or three tackles that are in equation. You could have, the top safety or two on the board. You could have a corner that you view as the best or second best corner. You could have the top guard available. You could have the top uh, tight end, maybe. So, what is the position out of all of those and the player that just makes the most sense? And I go back and forth on this almost every day, just because I I can almost be convinced on a number of different things. I still, more than in the back of my head throughout this entire process, I still go back to at least offensive line, just because one, Brad Holmes's comments at the start of this offseason about, and uh, don't quote me exactly on it, but saying that they really wanted to invest in the offensive line. Now I think they certainly have done that, at least to this point in the offseason. Really, the only big, in terms of years and money, free agency guy they've put an investment towards with Cade Mays. So you get your big center upgrade there. Outside of that, at least now, they're not in a, I'd argue they're in a similar spot. I think Larry Borum at right tackle and Sewell at left tackle is just as good, if not better, than year 13 Decker at left tackle and Sewell at right tackle. But I still think they want to have more impact to that. So using a first round pick on another offensive lineman, probably a tackle, or if it's just, Banga at guard, who you just think is amazing, and you're getting a premium piece there. To me, that still adds up the most. Now, at the same time, when I'm thinking about this, I think, how many times on the show have I basically said this offense is incredible and they could probably do, even last year they ranked fifth, and they did get a center upgrade. So really, I'd be pretty shocked if they're any worse than top five again in offense. So, and they've already, like I said, the one big free agency investment they've made was into center. I think most people would agree the offense is, pretty unquestionably a top five type offense. So don't they kind of need to spend a bigger resource on the defense? Because to this point, they basically, you have DJ Wanham, okay, but you lost Al-Quadin Muhammad and Roy Lopez. You lost Anzalone. I think their secondary is in pretty good position, but they do have both the safeties kind of a little bit in question, and then the corners both coming off years where you hoped Arnold and Reed would have played better. So, really, it's almost like if you just in a vacuum, I didn't know anything who the prospects were, who's going to be at 17, and you just dropped me down from Mars and were like, who are the Lions going to take in the first round? I'd be like, they're for sure going to take a defensive player. But I don't know that there's one there that just throughout this whole process, there really hasn't been a defensive player. I'm just like, that
No, we
really
don't need.
stands out, and he's a great value there. And like, there could be one. Like, it wouldn't be shocking to me if they love, Mesidor or Falk or one of the safeties, or like you said, McCoy. They could just view him as an incredible talent, and if he's there, we're just going to take him. None of those truly would be shocking to me, but none of them also stand out as like, yeah, they're for sure. This is a great guy that they have to take. And then there's like, it seems to be, I know Brad Holmes speaking, of this specific topic. He kind of downplayed the tackle class. He was like, yeah, it's kind of the same as ones before, but the tackle class does seem to be kind of a strength of this class. Like, I do think is going to be probably 6 or 7 tackles taken in the first round, or at least that's what literally every mock draft you look at essentially shows. So a lot of it just adds up to at 17, they would take an offensive lineman to me.
So the question is, I mean, obviously we heard Brad Holmes say about the tackle position, how it could be just like any other draft. The question would be to Brad Holmes, if I was in front of Brad Holmes, would be, okay, what makes this class the same as every other class? Is there certain players that you believe that are 2 or 3 notches ahead and there's only 2 or 3? Or do you think that there's 4 or 5 that could potentially start, but there's no Penei Sewell? Which if there's no Sewell, there's no Sewell. I mean, I did a stat I think it was Saturday, where I mentioned that, since 2002, okay, there's been 5 tackles that have got under 15 pressures or less in, I think, 50% of snaps. Brian O'Neill was one from the Vikings.
As
The sec
rookies, you're saying?
Yeah, as
Yeah.
rookies, yes. Because I wanted to go as I really wanted to just see as rookies what they did. Because I know that last year's rookies and the year after's rookies, they weren't that great. So I went back and I said, look, let's see where we gotta go. And I went back and I'm trying to find it right now, but it was Larry Borum was up there of all people. I think he was fourth, if I'm getting it correctly. Let me see. I got it right here. But Larry Borum was fourth. Sewell was first. Jermaine Illuminor was number one. It was just insane that, like, look, I know a lot of people are worried about tackle, and my thing about tackle has always been and always will be for next week. If they take a tackle, I'm gonna say it the same as I said it the whole time that we've been doing this draft prep. You can't really expect a lot out of them. You really can't. I mean, these rookie tackles, they're just not ready. I'm trying to look for the statistic, but it's somewhere. But when I find it, I'll let you know. But I just, when you look at these guys, like, go down the line, like they struggle mightily in their first year, and then some don't even in the second year don't even turn out to be. It takes like 3 or 4 years. Now we got lucky with Detroit with Sewell. Like, there's not many Penei Sewells out there. Like, I was laughing because they were talking about Malawoga. They were talking about Spencer Fanu. And the one thing that they were saying was, there's very few true right tackles. Spencer Fano might be a right tackle. Caleb Lamo might be a right tackle. This is all projection, and there's a lot of teams that need offensive linemen. So what gets hyped up the most is going to be offensive linemen because teams need them, and that's why they're going to try to sell intrigue. But if you have a player like, I did a quick mock draft, Jahmyr McCoy was on the board. I don't know, man. That's one pick I'd be like, okay, we'll sit here and we'll try to talk it out. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, I really don't know on the defensive guys. All of them seem to have like none of the defensive linemen are. Most of the mock drafts I'm seeing now actually are moving a lot of these guys like Mesidor and Falk and Parker like to the late 20s, and it just kind of seems to fit the mood of kind of what I'm saying, and that there's not a lot of these. Actually, the DBs now are all the ones that I'm, to be honest, the guys that I'm most interested in are the safeties. Those are the guys that I'm like Thieneman. I'm almost 100% convinced the Vikings are going to take Thieneman right
Yeah,
after the Lions. And I'm just like, I feel like this guy's going to be really, really good. You can never have enough guys like that, especially I was who was I, it might have been one of the other Lion shows, but because I was kind of seeing the same thing. He kind of reminds me a lot of Branch. Like he is really versatile. So
yeah,
like I'd have no problem finding a role for him as a rookie and feeling
yep.
like it's an impactful guy that you're taking. And I don't doubt that Brad Holmes would make a move like that if he views that player like he's like just as good as Brian Branch. I have no doubt he probably thinks highly of that player. So
That's